Stock Valuation, Peachtree Securities, Case B, prepared by Ybarra. On this current slide, you can see question 1A and question 1B. Question 1A asks to find the nominal expected rate of return as well as the effective annual rate of return. On the slide, you can see the calculation I used to calculate the nominal rate of return, which was 0.09 or 9%, and the effective annual rate of return, there you can see the formula that I used, which was 0.0931 or 9.31%. 1B asks to find the nominal required rate of return if it's 8%. What is the current value per share? So for this one, it took a little bit of more calculation. So since there's 300,000 shares outstanding, I divided it by 60,000, which gave me a total period, which gave me five periods. Those 5 periods each had a cumulative dividend of 9.75%. So with that, each period's shares outstanding was multiplied by the cumulative dividend, which gave me an interest value for every period. And since there were 60,000 shares, redeemed every year, I multiplied that by 100, which gave me 6 million. 6 million was then added to the interest, which gave me a total payment, and the total payment was then discounted by 8% by every period. Once I calculated that, I got the discounted figure, which you can see in this current slide. And to get the share price, I divided that by $300,000 outstanding shares, which gave me a share price of 104. On this current slide, you can see question 2, which has 4 parts. Part A asks to find the expected rate of return at the beginning of 1992. You can see the calculations that I used for Part A, which I ended up finding a required rate of return after using the Gordon model of 14.58%. Part 2B asks what was the expected dividend yield and expected capital gains yield on January 1st, 1992. This was very simple to calculate. Since 1.8 was the dividend yield of January 1st, 1992, you divide that by 22.26, which gives you a expected dividend yield, an expected capital gain yield of 8.09, and the expected future growth rate, which is in this case happens to be 6%, since it is the expected growth rate for 1992. Question 2C asks, what is the relationship between dividend yield and capital gains yield over the time under constant growth assumptions? My answer was both will remain the same, since both the price and dividend are expected to grow at the same rate, which is the expected growth rate. Part 2D asks, what conditions must hold to use a constant growth Gordon model? Do many real-world stocks satisfy the constant growth assumptions? And my answer was many conditions that affect the company's profitability and future growth of the company and their stock must hold constant for the Gordon model. Some of these conditions that hold the Gordon model constant are how the company issues their dividends, how their stock is expected to grow at the constant rate of G, as well as their sales and revenues must grow at this rate of G. I believe that not many real-world stocks satisfy the constant growth assumptions because many companies do not follow the conditions in which they hold the constant growth model. However, a company that has been around for a while and has proven to grow their sales and revenues over a recorded period of time can satisfy. You see question 3A and 3B. For 3A, we were asked to find the value of TICO stock on January 1st, 1992 if the required rate of return is 13.5%. Presuming that the dividend is 1.80 at the beginning of 1992, we were able to compute all of the dividends for the other periods at a growth rate of 6%. In order to find D6, we needed to find the price for D5, so once we got a value, we multiplied the dividend by the constant growth rate of 7.5%. We needed the price for year 5 so that we can use that value in the Gordon's model with a required rate of 13.5 to find the price for D6. The price that was computed using the Gordon model is then added to year 5 dividends to get the total cash flow. All of the other cash flows then must be discounted back to the rate of 13.5% and then compounded by the number of years. To find the dividend price for 1997, you can see the equation that I used below, which gave me a value of 43 and 17 cents. You then add year 5 dividend to the price, which then gives me a value of 45.58. And then once you see the calculation, the stock price, once you do all the calculation, you can find that the stock price for 1992 was $30.28. Part B asks, what is the expected stock price at the end of 1992, assuming that the stock is in equilibrium? So this part of the question 3 is fairly simple and can be solved using the same method as part A. The cash will remain exactly the same instead. We do one less period and begin with 1993. 1994 becomes D1. The same method was applied in 3A, which is shown to see how the stock prices for the beginning of 1993 was found. So after using the same method, I found the stock price for 1993 to be $32.46. You can see question 3 with part 3C, 3D, and 3E. Part 3 asks to find the stock price at the end of 1993 or beginning of 1994. So the same method was used on part 3B. So the stock price in 1994 was $34.82, which you can see the calculations above in the current slide. Part D asks what the expected dividend yield and capital gains yield and total return for 1992. So in order to find this, since we already saw for the stock price in 1992, which is $30.28, we can find the expected dividend yield by using the calculated dividend of 1.91 and dividing it from the stock price of 30.28, which gives us a dividend yield of 6.3. To find the capital gains, we use the formula return equals ending minus beginning divided by beginning, which you can see below as well, and the capital gains for 1992 was 7.2%. You add the capital gains yield and the dividend yield to find the total return for 1992, which gave me a value of 13.5%. Part E asks if the required rate of return is 13.5, would TICO's stock value be higher or lower than your answer in Part A? So, for this section, since the dividend was expected to remain the same for 5 years at a constant $1.80, the same method was used in Part 3A. To find D6, we used the dividend yield for D5 and multiplied it by the growth rate of 6%, which gave us the dividend yield for year 6, which was 1.91. The dividend yield for D6 was used to find the price in year 5, then the value was added to the dividend yield for year 5, which can be seen in the calculation in the slide. After finding the price, the future cash flows must be discounted back at the required rate of return, which is 13.5. So after doing all the calculations, which can be seen in the slide, the stock price for 1992 was $19.78. This last slide, you can see question 3, part F, G, and H. Part F asks, using the growth rates given in the introduction to this question, what is the stock's expected rate of return? So from looking at the growth rates from the past 5 years that were given to us, the average of those growth rates were 5%. The average, once the average growth rate was found, we used the formula seen in the slide to find the expected rate of return. D1 was the dividend yield for 1992, and the stock price was 22.26. So using these values, TICO's expected rate of return was found to be 13.58%, which is seen above. Part G asks, based on the information provided in value line tables, is the assumed 6% growth rate reasonable? So after doing some calculations, we were, the formula that I used was current minus beginning divided by beginning, and the full year dividends were given to us as well. So all we did was compute for the growth, and we got the average of the growth rate, which was 6.69%. So from looking at the growth rate, I was able to assume that the growth rate found is not reasonable. It can be seen in two views, depending if viewing it in the long run and short term. Part H, however, asks, given value lines ROE estimated for 1995 through 1997, and at the projected earnings and dividends per share for the same period, could these figures be used to develop an estimated long-run sustainable growth rate? And does the figure support the 7.5% growth rate given in this problem? To solve this last section of question 3, the method used to find growth and see if these figures can be used to develop sustainable growth was computing to find the retention ratios. To find the retention ratios, we minus the payout ratio by 1, then use those values and multiply the retention ratios by the ROE of each period. This then gave us the growth rates for each period. After calculating and solving for all the growth rates for each period, I then found the average, which is seen in the table. The average growth rate from 1995 through 1997 was found to be 5.28%, which is far below the 7.5 growth rate in this problem. So this clearly does not show that it does not support the 7.5 growth rate, but however, yes, these figures can be used to develop an estimated long-run sustainable growth rate. Thank you, and I am